response to intervention or to the project. He is a nationally recognized board certified teacher. He taught 5th and 6th grade for 9 years. He also worked as a reading professional development specialist and literacy specialist. When not working, he can be found on a hiking trail or at an Oregon Ducks football game. Beautiful. His specialties include high-quality instruction in reading, writing, and math for curriculum and assessment. Dean earned his Bachelor of Arts in Human Services and Sociology from the University of Oregon and his Master's in Elementary Education from the University of Washington. Please join me in a Parkrose welcome of Dean Richards.
Morning, everybody. Isn't like the day like the weirdest day, right? Because like your alarm goes off, and you're like, what is that? And it's sort of like summer brain, right? Summer here and summer not. Right? It kind of like just leads you to this like kind of haze. And I all appreciate both the speeches that people have made before, but also I know that you would all much rather be in your classrooms right now. Right? That's the place to be, right? And so I'm going to try and talk through some things. You're going to get some of this stuff in paper form and maybe some stuff in electronic form. And I'm going to talk about vocabulary instruction, is what I've been asked to talk to you about today, because it really goes from kindergarten all the way up through students who are on IEPs who may be 20 years old within our schools. And vocabulary is so linked to everything with our success in school and beyond. And it's beyond what we know about how we think, and vocabulary is something that we constantly are working on throughout our lifetimes. And so I want to talk a little bit about that, because it's this idea of words. And words, that's all we have in a way to communicate with each other. And so when we talk about vocabulary instruction, I'm going to talk about some myths around that first. And the first myth is that we can't explicitly teach words. That there are too many words to teach. And although that is true, we cannot possibly teach every word that is necessary for our students to know. It is vitally important that we do teach explicitly words. And up through 6th grade, about 80% of the words that kids learn are explicitly taught to them by us as teachers, by their parents, by each other. You can have that kid pull on your leg and say, well, what's this word mean? Right? It happens all the time. And so we want to be sure that we're explicitly teaching words. Also, another myth is that kids can just read and sort of figure out words within context. Now, it is true that some kids can do that. Generally, they're the kids who have the flashlight under their blankets at night and can, they're into U, which is early and wide reading. Like early and wide, they're going to read lots and lots of stuff. But our struggling students, they're not doing that. Right? They're growing up with SpongeBob and Xboxes. They don't have the background knowledge and the prior knowledge to figure out the words through their context. So although that is an important piece of vocabulary instruction to teach them how to figure out prefixes and suffixes and all these other things, they can't just read and figure it out. We have to explicitly teach that. And although we want to make sure that we're showing them how to do that, one of the things that we also, a myth is that just go look it up in the dictionary. Right? Dictionaries are written to shorten the definition as much as possible so more words can fit in there. So you end up going and looking up a word in the dictionary that contains the word you're looking up sometimes. And so using those resources are an important tool, but it's also necessary to explicitly teach. So we have those 3 ways of teaching the words, but we're explicitly teaching them, which is what I'm going to talk a little bit more about. but also to be able to use the morphology and syntax to figure out words. And then to know how to use and when to use resources, including our pant leg when they come up and ask us. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time on that idea of vocabulary explicit instruction, because there is a huge gap. And the research has shown that students in kindergarten may come in with a few, maybe 500 word gap that kids might know, and even down into like 3-year-olds. They might know 500 words if they're in poverty, 1,700 words if they have been exposed to lots of rich background and conversations. It's not that big of a gap, but it grows and grows if we aren't explicitly teaching words. And by the time that they reach our secondary schools, that vocabulary gap is tens of thousands of words. And so we have to sort of use that, the British term, mind the gap, right? We have to be able to be paying attention to that vocabulary gap by explicitly teaching words as we move through. Because from our kindergartners through our graduates, they have to know many, many words. And the earlier that they know them, the more likely they are to graduate. And there's a lot of research that supports that. And in fact, if we start looking more at some of that research for second language learners, for secondary learners, it's usually so the government's done a bunch of studies. They call these the IES Guide, the Institute for Educational Sciences. The first recommendation for secondary is explicitly teach vocabulary, because it's really necessary piece. And what we want them to do with that vocabulary is not just understand it when we tell it to them, but also that they can use it and think like a scientist when they're in a high school biology class. Or that they can express the difference between a treble and a bass clef in one of your new music classes. That they can use that term and discuss it. It's not just that they understand it as it comes in. So we have receptive and expressive vocabulary as two key pieces. So as you think about the words that you're teaching students, also expect them to use those words in response, both orally and in writing. The key component of vocabulary instruction is the use of it. So here's the trick. When you start looking at some of that curriculum pieces that are sitting in your rooms, some of them are sitting in shrink wrap in your rooms, right? Some of them are piling up. The question is, which words do we teach? Because we don't have all the time to be able to do that, right? And the curriculum isn't necessarily the answer. Because they're not written, those curricula are not written for your students. Some students may have a lot more background knowledge than is necessary. In fact, there's one curriculum, it's a 4th grade story called The Raft. And one of the vocabulary words is raft. I think we can get that from the story. There's a picture of it on page 72. Right? Let's not spend time on that. But the raft floats on some water that shimmers. You want to think a little bit more about the word shimmer, because that takes a whole lot more than raft. So your curriculum may not give you the answers. So I'm going to talk briefly about what it takes to think about which words to teach. And sometimes the first thing I want you to think about is, what are the big ideas that you're trying to teach in general? What is your essential question that you're getting across? Because the curriculum may not have that same idea. So it might be a word like democracy. It may not be explicitly taught. But you need to teach that word so that they can then go in and understand the branches of government. Because it's not explicitly written there. Or function in math. Being able to understand that rather than just say, use the function. They don't know what a function is, they can't do that. Another one is the idea of building an academic toolkit. that your students are carrying with them. So these are words that they can use across the schools, right? So that they are, and across their school day. Words that what Isabel Beck, who is a researcher, calls Tier 2 words. And these words are words that are in general use, but not necessarily common. The word shimmer, for example. Most fourth graders aren't talking about things that shimmer. We would like them to, right? That's a good word that we want them to be able to use and express. So some of those words might be things like absurd, fortunate, analyze. We're going to need to have to teach kids how to use some of those words. Some of those academic words that they can use, whether they're learning math or science or in the arts, and help to build that academic vocabulary. We also want them to build a disciplinary toolkit, right? Something that they can use in math class from the earliest time up through high school. So how do we start to use a word like perimeter? We don't usually talk about perimeter unless we're talking about some sort of math idea. So explicitly teaching words like that are specific to those domains. And this is beyond this academic. It's not academic, it helps them anywhere, but discipline, we're going to talk in PE about, well, it's time to do a sacrifice fly. This is, how do we do that? How do we teach these words specifically as we move across? So these terms are Tier 3 words, in the words of Isabel Beck. The words that they're probably not using except in your class, but are necessary to be able to think and express their ideas as a scientist, as a mathematician, and beyond. And the last one that is particularly important, and the word is polysemous. It has a couple of different ways of, it's a vocabulary talk. I may as well use some vocabulary words that maybe not everybody knows. And polysemous words are words that have multiple meanings. If you look up the word run in the dictionary, it has 38 different definitions. Yeah, S to the end of it, and there's a couple more, right? I mean, you start saying, well, I want you to run this office and run this paper to the office and run it off. Students, second language students, students who have been raised by SpongeBob, they're thinking of runs, not run. So we want them to have this idea of multiple meaning words. And we want to teach them specific to your domain. Because if I say, well, I want you to define power, well, in PE, it's going to be what the power that it takes to lift something. And in social studies, it's about the balance of power. And it's in science, it's about the power of the microscope. Or solar power. And in math, we're going to talk about, well, this is, to the third power. Our students who need the specific academic language, they don't know the difference here. We have to be explicit about that instruction. They're not going to figure this out from the context. So we want to make sure that we're explicitly teaching those things. So I want to give you a quick way of doing that. And it's 4 steps. And these are academic routines, and you'll be seeing a lot of these within curricula all around. But when we start talking about having an academic routine around vocabulary, think about how powerful this can be for students. They will always know how they're going to learn specific words. Whether they're in kindergarten at Prescott or in the science class at the middle school. And as they move through, this is the routine that we use for how we teach words. Rather than, well, you go look it up over here, and who can tell me the definition of? We have a routine, and students know that. So here's the routine. The first piece is simple. We want to have them say the word. Because you can't remember a word if you can't express the word. Right? And we do that all the time. I mean, at least I do. I'll be reading in some book and I'll come to a word and I have no idea what that word means. Happen to some of you sometimes? Right? Where you're kind of like, and then you don't know how to say it, you don't know what it means, and you skip it and move on. And generally, we're pretty good readers as educators. Those words are going to be the ones that carry a lot of meaning. It's the same for our students. So we want them to just say the word out loud. So if I was going to teach the word peripatetic, so I would want everybody to say peripatetic. So let's say the word peripatetic. Ready? Peripatetic. Peripatetic. So peripatetic, so a couple of things I might also do here is I might teach peripatetically. Right? So we want to teach the word families. So it's not just here's this word, but here's the other ways that this word starts to look and ways you might run into it and other things. You might want to show them how to break it apart in its syllables, because they may not know how to do that. For some students, the idea that there is a vowel in every syllable is like a news flash. So we want to show them. So peripatetic. So first thing is we're going to say the word. The next thing is we give them a student-friendly definition, not a dictionary definition. Where we're going to say peripatetic. Peripatetic, something or someone who is peripatetic travels a lot. So we're just giving them a very simple definition, but we're using our words, not big academic domain words. We're being as specific as we can. And really helping them be able to use that word when they go to it. So we're going to say the word. We're going to give them that student-friendly definition. Right? Rather than look it up in the dictionary or look it up in the glossary. We're going to tell them that. Next is we're going to connect it to something. So first we say the word. Then we give a student-friendly definition, and then we connect it. So we might say, the salesman had such a peripatetic lifestyle that they named a room after him at the hotel. So we might give text examples, we might give verbal examples, we might show them things. If it's something that's a noun, we might show them pictures. Somehow that we're going to connect our words to something else. And then the final piece, when we talk about vocabulary instruction. So we say the word, student-friendly definition, we connect it, and then we check for understanding. How are we going to see that they are able to use this word? So, thumbs up or thumbs down with my word peripatetic that I've taught you so far. Does this word mean the same thing as peripatetic, which is someone who travels a lot? A homebody. Is that person peripatetic? Yes or no? Quick check for understanding, that's all it takes, right? I might say, a wanderer. Yes or no? Quick check. So even right there, that's our most basic level. Some words might need a little bit more. We might want them to distinguish between, as we just did, examples and non-examples. But we might also want to have the students generate ideas. And some of you are probably doing this a lot, have them write a sentence with the vocabulary word in it. I remember doing that a lot. And I would kind of use the same sentence all the time. If it's a noun, just like, I saw a, put in the word. So here's a step, an idea that you can use next week. And it's called generative sentences. So you're going to teach a word. Maybe you're teaching biology about cells. And you would say, I want you to use the word cell in a sentence in the third position. Word, word, cell. And the sentence has to be 8 words long. Right? No longer can we just say, I have a cell. We have to be able to extend it beyond that. And the students start to revise, and they start to write academic sentences, and they start to express the vocabulary that we've been teaching, and they're using it, and they're pairing up, and they're talking about it. So an idea to take with you, a nugget, is when we're connecting, is to use these generative sentences. They could be verbal, they could be written. But the idea is get them using the words and making sure that those words make sense. It could be an exit slip that they write on the way out the door, and you have a stack of 3x5 cards, and they write them up, and you look through, got it, didn't get it, got it. All right, I'm good. This one kid, need to work with that one kid. Need to reteach this word. Wow, nobody got this word. Need to get it again tomorrow. Because you picked the right words, right? Because the curriculum may not be the right words. So you're thinking about how to practice those words within them. So to wrap up, it is really important for us to explicitly teach words. It is not enough for us just to give them tools. It's necessary. It's not enough for them to guess and go and move on if they haven't figured out the words. But we have to pick those words, the right words for them to read and to be taught explicitly. Those words that are the big ideas that add to their academic toolkit, to their disciplinary toolkit, that are polysemous, that have multiple meanings. And then when we teach those words, we use a routine where we're going to say the word. We're going to give them that student-friendly definition. We're going to connect it with something. And then we're going to check to see if they have that word in their minds. Because this idea that vocabulary is so connected to what we understand and what we can think about and what we can do within the discipline is exceedingly important. So I thank you all for your time very much. I hope you'll get some of this in writing as well, so you didn't have to take any notes. The summer brains, we're getting those ready to go. And I appreciate your time. Go forth and teach those kids. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dean. I love the way he modeled the lesson. Did you guys see that? He did a really good job of thinking, why am I going to do this? Told you about it, came right back